My name is Claire. I'm 34 years old. I teach English literature at a small college by the coast. For most of my life, I've lived inside books. Even as a teacher, I've always found it easier to lose myself in stories than in people. Pages feel safer than hearts. My days follow the same pattern. Wake up. Brew coffee. Feed my cat, Oliver. Drive to campus. Lecture, grade papers, smile at students. Come home. Repeat. It's quiet, it's steady, and most days, it's lonely. I never expected anything to change. Until the morning he walked into my class. His name was Adam. He was tall, with dark hair that looked like it never fully obeyed him. His eyes, warm brown but sharp, had a way of locking onto you as if he actually listened, not just heard. He didn't slide into the back row like most guys his age. He sat in the second row, close enough for me to notice him, but not so close that it looked like he wanted attention. It was the first week of the semester, and I was introducing Shakespeare's sonnets. Most students looked half bored. But when I read aloud, "Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds," I saw him lean forward like the words pulled him in. After class, while everyone was packing up, he stayed behind. "Professor," he said, "do you think Shakespeare meant that love should be unchanging, or that real love adapts to change?" I froze for half a second. His tone was thoughtful, not flirtatious. But there was something in the way he asked, a kind of depth I rarely saw. "That's a good question," I replied. "I think he's saying that love doesn't fade just because circumstances shift. Real love holds steady." He smiled a little. "That's what I thought too." And then he left. I should have forgotten about it. Just another bright student with an insightful question. But I didn't. I remembered his voice, his expression, the way he stood there, waiting for my answer like it mattered. The weeks went by, and I began noticing him more. He always came prepared, always contributed to discussions without showing off, always met my eyes when I spoke. I told myself I was just appreciating a dedicated student. That's all. But deep down, I knew there was something else, something I didn't want to name. One chilly afternoon, I saw him in the campus library. He was sitting by the window, sunlight spilling over the table, reading a battered copy of Wuthering Heights. "That book will break your heart," I said as I passed. He looked up, grinning. "It already is." I laughed softly. "It's dangerous, letting books do that to you." "I know," he said, "but sometimes it's the only way to feel alive." That stayed with me longer than I wanted to admit. I began noticing the smallest things about him, how he tapped his pen against the desk when he was thinking, how he wrote in his margins, not just notes, but questions, quotes, even little sketches. How he sometimes lingered after class, as if he had more to say but held it back. And then one evening, as I was leaving campus, I found him standing under the awning near the entrance, looking out at the rain. "Forgot your umbrella?" I asked. He smiled sheepishly. "Didn't think it would rain this hard." "Come on," I said, holding mine out. "I'll walk you part of the way." We walked slowly, the rain tapping above us. We talked about books, music, even our favorite coffee shops. It was easy, too easy. The air between us felt different, not just teacher and student, something unspoken, but alive. When we reached the corner where our paths split, he said, "Thanks for the company, Professor." "Any time," I answered, and meant it more than I should have. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the walk in my head, his voice, his smile, the way our shoulders had brushed just slightly under the umbrella. I told myself I was being foolish. He was my student. There were rules, and I had built my entire career on following them. But feelings don't care about rules. The next week, after a particularly lively class discussion, he stayed behind again. I wanted to say, he began, your class, it's different. The way you talk about books, it makes them feel real. I've never had that before. I felt heat rise to my face. That's kind of you to say. I'm glad you're enjoying it. It's more than that, he said quietly, almost as if to himself. It makes me want to, I don't know, be better. There was a pause, long enough for me to feel the weight of every word hanging between us. Then he smiled faintly and left. I stood there for a long time after he was gone, because I knew this wasn't just about literature anymore, and I was in more danger than I'd ever been in my life. After that day, something shifted. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was subtle, like the change in air before a storm. The way you can feel it even before the first drop falls. I told myself I was imagining it, that Adam's words were just gratitude from a student who liked my class. But the truth was, I started noticing him in ways I had no business noticing. It was in the way he leaned forward when I spoke, like he didn't want to miss a word. The way his smile lingered just a moment longer than polite. The way he sometimes paused at the door after class, as if waiting for me to say something first. And I hated myself for noticing. The rules were clear. Professors don't get involved with students. Not while they're enrolled in your class. Not while you're responsible for their grades. It wasn't just about ethics, it was about power, boundaries, trust. And I had spent my whole career respecting those rules. Until now. One Thursday afternoon, he stayed behind after everyone else left. Professor, he said, do you have a minute? I nodded, already feeling my pulse quicken. I'm working on the essay you assigned. The one about how personal experience shapes how we interpret literature. Yes. I think I want to write about loss. But it's not exactly an academic story. It's personal. His eyes met mine, and for a second, the classroom felt too small. Literature is personal, I said softly. The best writing comes from the places that hurt. If you're willing to share it, I'm willing to read it. He nodded slowly, and I swear there was something else in his gaze. Gratitude, yes, but also something warmer, something more dangerous. Later that week, I found myself waiting for him to speak in class, listening for his laugh, catching myself looking for him when I walked into the room. And every time I caught myself, I reminded myself, stop it, Claire. He's your student. This can't happen. But it didn't stop. One evening, I stayed late in my office, grading essays. The campus was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like the world has gone to sleep. My door was half open when I heard footsteps. Then a knock. It was him. Sorry to bother you, he said, stepping in. I wanted to give you my essay early. I took the pages from him. You could have just emailed it. I could have, he said, smiling faintly, but I wanted to see your reaction when you read it. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The essay wasn't just good, it was raw, personal. He wrote about losing his mother when he was 17, about the silence in the house after the funeral, about how books became his escape. And in between the lines, I saw glimpses of him, the real him, without the classroom walls between us. When I looked up, my throat was tight. It's beautiful, I said. Thanks, he replied, his voice low. I guess I wanted you to know more about me. The air between us thickened. I could feel the pull. That invisible thread I kept trying to cut, but somehow only tightened. I set the essay down, forcing a smile. You should head home. It's late. He lingered a second, his eyes locked on mine, and then finally left. When the door clicked shut, I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath the whole time. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, arguing with myself. He's just being friendly. He's young. You're his teacher. You're imagining this. But another voice whispered back, you're not imagining it. And that's why it's dangerous. The days that followed only made it worse. He started showing up early to class. Sometimes he'd bring coffee. I got an extra, thought you might want one. Other times he'd ask about books we weren't even covering, just to keep talking. One afternoon, as students were filing out, he brushed past me to hand in his paper. His hand grazed mine, light, accidental, but enough to send a current through me. I don't know if he felt it too, but his eyes lingered a fraction of a second too long. That night, I called my best friend, Anna. She's a fellow professor, someone who's known me for years. I think I might be in trouble, I confessed. What kind of trouble? She asked. There's a student. He's different, smart, kind, and I can't stop thinking about him. Claire, she said slowly, you know you can't. I know, I cut in. I know the rules. I know it's wrong. But knowing doesn't make it stop. She was silent for a moment. Then, you need distance. Don't let this go any further. It's not worth your career. Or his education. I promised her I would. But promises are easier to make than keep. The next week, the weather turned colder. I was leaving campus when I saw him leaning against the low wall by the parking lot, scrolling through his phone. Waiting for someone? I asked. He looked up and smiled. You. It caught me off guard. Me. I figured you were done by now. Thought maybe we could walk together again, like last time. My heart was already answering yes before my brain could form a sentence. Okay, I said softly. We walked through the crisp evening air, our breath visible in little clouds. Our conversation wandered. Books, family, the city, the kind of things you only share when you feel close. When we reached the corner, I said, "This is me." He hesitated. "Claire," he stopped himself, corrected. "Professor, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you ever feel like you connect with someone in a way you can't explain?" The question landed heavy in my chest. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. "Yes," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled faintly, like I'd confirmed something for him. "Me too." We stood there in the cold for a moment longer, neither of us moving. Then he turned and walked away. I watched him go, my hands trembling inside my coat pockets. Because I knew, this wasn't just connection anymore. It was temptation. And I didn't know if I could resist it much longer. After that night, the air between us was never the same. It wasn't just glances anymore. It was something heavier, something unspoken but felt in every conversation, every smile, every moment we stood too close. I tried to convince myself I was still in control. That as long as I kept my words professional, my actions restrained, I was safe. But the truth? I was slipping. Every day, I felt the ground under me tilt just a little more. It started in small ways. The way my heart lifted when I saw his name on the attendance sheet. The way I'd catch myself looking for him when I walked into the classroom. The way I'd pause before replying to his questions, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I didn't want the moment to end. One afternoon, we had an in-class reading session. Most students had their heads down, focused on their texts. Adam sat by the window, light spilling across his face. He was reading intently, his lips moving faintly with the words. When he looked up, our eyes met, and for a moment, the rest of the room faded away. It was just him and me, suspended in that quiet space where everything else stopped. I looked away first, my pulse racing. Later that week, he emailed me late at night. Subject: question about the essay. But the email wasn't just about the essay. He asked about writing style, about life experiences, about how personal truth shapes the stories we tell. He mentioned how he admired the way I saw beyond the text and made him think differently about the world. I shouldn't have replied right away, but I did. And then he replied back. Before I knew it, we were trading messages until nearly 1 a.m. The next morning, I told myself I had to set boundaries. But when he walked into class and smiled at me in that way that felt like a shared secret, all my good intentions scattered like dust. The turning point came on a Friday evening. I had stayed late in my office to finish grading. The halls were nearly empty. As I packed my bag, I heard a knock. It was him. "Sorry," he said, stepping inside. "I was hoping you were still here. I didn't want to send this over email." He handed me a printed short story he'd written, completely unrelated to class. "I just wanted you to read it." I scanned the first few lines. The story was about a woman who falls for someone she can't have. The details were vague enough to be anyone, but the emotions, they felt familiar. Too familiar. "It's beautiful," I said softly, setting it down. He leaned against the doorframe, watching me. "You really think so?" "Yes," I replied. "You have a gift." He stepped closer. "You know, you're the only person I've wanted to share my writing with. I feel like you understand it in a way no one else would." His voice was low, and the space between us had shrunk to nothing. I could smell the faint scent of his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from him. I swallowed. "Adam, we can't." "I know," he interrupted gently. "I'm not asking for anything you don't want to give. I just needed you to know." The silence that followed felt louder than words. My heart was hammering, my mind screaming at me to put distance between us. But I didn't move. Finally, I forced myself to step back. "You should go. Before we make a mistake." He nodded, but the look in his eyes told me he didn't believe it was over. And deep down, neither did I. From that night on, things intensified. Our conversations grew longer. His compliments became less veiled. In class, he'd answer questions while looking directly at me, his voice warm in a way that made me feel like his words were meant for me alone. I started dressing more carefully on days I knew I'd see him. A little more effort in my hair. A softer shade of lipstick. I told myself it was just professionalism, but the mirror knew better. One afternoon, it rained unexpectedly, and most students rushed out after class. Adam lingered. "Do you need a ride home?" he asked. I hesitated. My car was in the lot, but the thought of saying no felt like pushing him away. "I'm fine, thank you," I replied. He smiled faintly. "I'll walk you to your car, then." We walked side by side under his umbrella, the sound of the rain around us like a curtain. When we reached my car, I turned to thank him, but he held my gaze a second too long. For a heartbeat, I thought he might kiss me. And for a heartbeat, I thought I might let him. Instead, he said quietly, "See you Monday," and walked away. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my mind spinning. It wasn't just him anymore. It was me. I wasn't just reacting to his presence. I was seeking it out. I caught myself wondering what he was doing when he wasn't in class, what he'd text me next, what it would feel like if the rules didn't exist. The tension between us had become its own living thing. And I knew, sooner or later, something would have to break. The week leading up to midterms was chaos. Students stayed after class more often, seeking extra help. My inbox overflowed with essays to review. I told myself the busyness would be a blessing, that it would keep me from thinking about him. I was wrong. If anything, it made it worse. He was in my office more than any other student that week, asking about his paper, discussing themes, sharing ideas. Each visit felt less academic, more personal. We'd talk about his essay for 10 minutes, and then spend the next 30 just talking. On Thursday afternoon, I stayed late to prepare for Friday's lecture. The campus was almost empty. Most students had already left for the long weekend. My office door was half shut when I heard a soft knock. It was him. "Professor," he said, leaning against the doorframe, "I didn't see you in the cafe earlier. I thought you might be here." I set my pen down. Working late. Midterm prep. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. My pulse jumped at the sound of the latch clicking. "Do you ever wish things were different?" he asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "Different how?" He held my gaze. "That you weren't my professor. That there wasn't a line between us." The air went still. "Adam," my voice was a whisper, my heart pounding. "You can't say things like that." "I know," he said softly, stepping closer. "But I can't stop thinking it. And I don't think you can either." I should have told him to leave. I should have stood up, opened the door, ended this before it went any further. But I didn't move. Instead, I looked at him, really looked at him, and I knew he was right. We were only a few feet apart now. I could feel the warmth from his body, smell the faint scent of rain on his jacket. My chest felt tight, like I'd been holding my breath for weeks. "I can't," I said finally, my voice trembling. "We can't." "But you want to," he murmured. That broke something in me. Before I could think, before I could talk myself out of it, I stood up from my desk. He didn't step back. Neither did I. And then his hand was on my cheek, warm and gentle, and my eyes fluttered shut. The first touch of his lips was tentative, almost questioning. But when I didn't pull away, it deepened. My hands found his shoulders, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. No rules, no titles, no fear. Just him and me. When we finally broke apart, I was breathing hard. He searched my face, as if looking for regret. But regret wasn't the first thing I felt. It was relief. "I shouldn't have done that," I whispered, even though my voice betrayed me. "I'm glad you did," he said, his thumb brushing my jaw. We stood there, suspended in that fragile moment, until reality crashed back in. "I can't," I began, but my voice caught. "We can't do this again." He nodded slowly, though I could see in his eyes that he didn't believe me. "Then I'll just have to live with the fact that I want to," he said, and turned to leave. When the door closed behind him, I sank back into my chair, my hands shaking. I knew what I'd just done. I knew what it could cost me. But a part of me also knew I'd do it again. That night, I couldn't stop replaying the moment in my mind, the way his lips felt against mine, the way my heart had raced like it hadn't in years. It was intoxicating, dangerous, addictive. The next morning, when he walked into class, nothing outwardly had changed. He took his usual seat. I started my lecture as if nothing had happened. But every time our eyes met, I felt it. The memory. The pull. The line between us wasn't just blurred anymore. It was gone. The days after that kiss were the hardest of my career. In the classroom, I wore the mask of professionalism, my voice calm, my posture controlled, my eyes avoiding his more than they met them. But beneath it, my mind was a storm. Every time I looked at him, I remembered. Every time he spoke, I heard the quiet intimacy of his voice from that night. And worst of all, I wanted more. He didn't make it easier. On Monday, after class, he lingered again. The other students had left, their laughter fading down the hall. He stepped closer to my desk, his tone low enough that only I could hear. "Are we going to pretend it didn't happen?" My throat tightened. "We have to." His eyes searched mine. "I don't want to." I gripped the edge of the desk, willing my voice to be steady. "Adam, if anyone found out." "No one will," he said quickly. "I'd never put you in danger." But he already had. And I had let him. I spent the next week creating distance. No lingering conversations, no personal emails, no opportunities for him to corner me alone. I told myself it was the right thing to do, the only way to protect both of us. But it hurt. It hurt more than I expected, like I'd taken something beautiful and locked it away in a box I couldn't open. My lectures felt emptier without his questions. My days felt quieter without the little moments we'd shared. One afternoon, I stayed late grading papers in the library's faculty lounge. When I finally packed up to leave, I found him waiting outside near the steps. "You've been avoiding me," he said, not as an accusation, but as a fact. "I'm keeping us safe," I replied. He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Safe doesn't feel like living." The words hit me like a punch. For a moment, I almost reached for him. Almost told him I didn't care about the rules, the risk, the consequences. But then I saw a group of students crossing the courtyard, laughing as they passed. And I remembered where we were, who we were, and what was at stake. "I can't lose everything I've worked for," I said quietly. He looked at me for a long time before nodding. "Then I guess I'll just have to keep loving you in silence." The words lodged in my chest. Loving me. He hadn't said wanting or liking. He'd said loving. I didn't know whether to feel elated or terrified. The semester crept toward its end. Exams replaced essays, and the hallways buzzed with nervous energy. I buried myself in grading, in faculty meetings, in anything that would keep me from thinking about him. But the truth was, every day I fought a war inside myself. One side told me to end it completely, to draw a hard line, to protect my career, to protect him from scandal. The other side whispered that we'd already crossed the line, that one kiss had changed everything, that pretending we could go back was a lie. The last day of class arrived. Students were light-hearted, relieved to be done. Adam lingered after the others left, standing by the door like he was holding himself back from coming closer. "This doesn't have to be goodbye," he said. I hesitated. "You'll graduate soon. You'll move on. This, whatever it was, will fade." He smiled faintly. "You don't believe that any more than I do." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time I realized he was right. What we had wasn't something that would simply fade because we told it to. But wanting it and being able to have it were two very different things. "I need time," I said finally. He nodded once, slowly, like he understood. "Then I'll give it to you." That night, after the building was empty and the sun had gone down, I sat alone in my classroom. The chairs were neatly arranged. The whiteboard was clean. Everything looked exactly as it had before the semester started. But I wasn't the same. I'd crossed a line I never thought I would. I'd felt things I didn't think I could feel again. And now I had to live with the choice I'd made, to pull away for both our sakes, even if it meant breaking my own heart. When I finally left, the air outside was cool and still. I walked to my car, the echo of his voice lingering in my mind. Safe doesn't feel like living. It's been months now. The semester ended. The grades were submitted. The students moved on. Adam moved on too, or at least, that's what I tell myself when I see his empty seat in the second row, when I walk into class and my eyes instinctively search for him before I remember he's gone. Some days, I almost convince myself it never happened. That he was just another student passing through my life. That there was no late-night email exchange, no umbrella in the rain, no kiss in the quiet of my office. But then I'll hear a line of poetry, something about longing or impossible love, and it's like I'm back there. Back in that moment. Back in the dangerous warmth of wanting someone I couldn't have. I've thought a lot about what happened between us. About why it happened. I think it's because I'd built my life into something safe. Predictable. Contained. I had walls around me so high that most people never even saw them. let alone tried to climb over. And then he did. Not by force. Not even on purpose. He just saw me in a way I hadn't been seen in years. And when someone sees you like that, really sees you, it's hard to turn away. But wanting him and being with him were two different things. We didn't cross the line in the way people might imagine. We didn't have an affair. We didn't destroy careers or futures. We had moments. Moments that were small enough to keep us from ruin, but big enough to change us forever. I still remember the way my heart would lift when he walked into the room. The way our eyes would find each other in the middle of a crowded class. The quiet tension that hummed under every conversation. It was thrilling. It was intoxicating. And it was terrifying. Because I knew the stakes. I knew that if we let ourselves fall completely, the consequences would be permanent. Not just for me, but for him. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I let go. Letting go doesn't always mean the feelings disappear. Sometimes it just means you choose not to act on them. You tuck them away in a place where they can't hurt anyone else, even if they still hurt you. And it did hurt. More than I expected. The truth is, there were nights when I lay in bed and thought about what could have been. About a different world where we weren't professor and student, where we could have been just two people. About what it would have felt like to stop resisting and just fall. But we don't live in that world. We live in this one. And in this world, loving someone isn't always enough. Sometimes I wonder if he still thinks about me. If he remembers the rain, the late-night talks, the quiet pauses before we said goodbye. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. What I do know is that he taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn, that even in a life that feels settled and safe, your heart can still surprise you. It can still wake up. It can still ache. I've heard people say that the heart wants what it wants. And that's true. But it also needs what it needs. It needs integrity. It needs boundaries. It needs the ability to walk away, even when it doesn't want to. Because love, real love, isn't just about holding on. Sometimes, it's about letting go before you break something that can't be fixed. And so here I am. A teacher. A woman. Someone who once fell for her student and had to live with the choice of walking away. Do I regret it? The kiss? The moments? The connection? No. Do I regret not letting it go further? Also no. Because some stories are meant to stay unfinished. Some chapters are better left closed, even if you keep rereading them in your mind. If you've ever felt like me, if you've ever wanted something you couldn't have, if you've ever stood on the edge between desire and consequence, you're not alone. You're not wrong for feeling. You're not weak for wanting. And you're not broken for choosing to walk away. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is nothing at all. And sometimes, that has to be enough.